Welcome back to the Film Alchemist podcast, the show where we look at movies we love, break them apart to find out what gives them their magique. I'm your host, Josh Griffey, joined as always by my one-eyed, super cool, glider flying, neck bomb having, badass and co-host.
Call me Dandino.
Oh, there you go.
It is. That's all I got.
It's weird because you're like, to keep trying to name things about Snake Plissken, you're like, just get to where it is. Badass. The most bad.
Yeah.
All right, guys, as always, if you like the show, and we hope that you do, please take a second and leave us a rating and review, especially on Apple Podcast app. That helps us out a lot, guys. Just when you're there getting the episode, click that 5-star. Tell people why you like the show. Another thing that helps us out tremendously, guys, is give us a shout out on your social media feeds. That helps us out enormously also. We're everywhere that you are. You can find us, engage, whatnot. We're there. You can email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com, with your ideas for movies you'd like to hear us talk about, double features, guest host, new movies you'd like, themes for a month, anything. I swear to you, if you reach out to us, it does make a master list that I have somewhere that is loaded with films that eventually will be covered. Also, you can see our faces on our YouTube channel, Nerd Alchemist, plural with an S at the end. So, guys, that's all the business. It is time for July. The theme for July, the pod calls a carpenter, right? We need help. So you guys know it's been a weird year. It's been a rough year. We're coming off fan pick month, rough, where the fans just pummeled us into submission with aggressive, hardcore movies. And so we're like, you know, we need to lighten it up, right? We got a lot of good art house drama, right? Stuff like that. Hard things to take in sometimes. One of them so hard that we actually didn't cover it, which I won't go into that right now.
We won't say what it is, but wow.
Yeah, we were actually put through the ringer so bad, we're like, I don't think we need to talk.
You out there who recommended that movie, we got to talk.
So what we did is we said, we need a fix, right? We need to bring it up a bit. So we called a carpenter, the carpenter, John Carpenter himself. I would argue he has my favorite filmography of any filmmaker ever. We've covered some John Carpenter on the show before. I know we've done They Live in the Thing, I believe is where we've been so far. Spoiler alert, this October, as part of our never-ending horror medley that we do every year, we will be covering a horror movie every single month in the day of October. Our main feature this October, we are covering every single Halloween movie. So more John Carpenter there. But right now, we're starting John Carpenter month with the Escape duo, right? Escape from New York, followed by Escape from LA this week. So, Alex, before we dive all the way into Escape from New York, you care to hit me up with just a brief summary. Why is John Carpenter so awesome? When we are in need of that movie magique fix, why is John Carpenter the one we reach for?
John Carpenter, to me, summarizes in a single person everything you love about movies.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
For one, he's never made, oddly enough, short of these two movies, he's never made the same movie twice, to be honest with you.
I guess you could argue Halloween and Halloween 2, but that's all right.
He didn't direct Halloween 2, though.
Oh, that's right. Because he came back for Halloween 3 and was like, fuck Michael Myers. I love it.
Like I said, never made the same movie twice, except for the movie we're about to talk about and its sequel itself. But again, like the other thing too is the other thing that I really enjoy about John Carpenter movies is that John Carpenter does such a good job of holding a mirror up to us without like overstating the premise. Like he holds a mirror up to society. They Live's a great example, like the most overt one. But the two movies we're going to discuss, which are the Escape movies, are almost the same fashion, but they're just very entertaining. So it buries that like overt political statute a little bit and gives you enough of an entertainment value where you're like, oh, cool, like Kurt Russell running around with a patch over his eye shooting people. Awesome. And then at the same time, you're like, oh, wow, this isn't that far off, is it? Like, that's like the other thing you're constantly thinking in the back of your mind while you're watching these movies. But that's, again, like what I said before is the thing that holds true for me with John Carpenter is that John Carpenter is like the person that embodies all the things people like about movies.
Yeah.
And
well, for me,
the way he makes them.
Yeah, no, for me, he's the guy. When I was at that formative age and I was trying to figure out what are cool movies, right? What are movies that I love? What are the things that get me fired up? More often than not, you would find yourself gravitating towards, John Carpenter movies. Because I remember one of my first, absolute loves. Like, one of the first movies I became fully, truly obsessed with was Halloween. Knew all the trivia. I had to watch it 100 times, blah, blah. And he was always there at that turn, right? When I was a really little kid, it was Big Trouble, Little China. And so, you find these movies. What I love about John Carpenter, too, is, like you said, a lot of his movies have these, kind of deep themes or political, thoughts on political ideologies, things like that, right? The Thing is kind of about, this desperate nature of man. There's a lot of that going on. But he gets all that across, but never at the cost of fun.
Yeah.
Right? John Carpenter movies work very much like Snake Plissken's body, right? Like, we got X amount of time. We got to get some shit done. But at the end of the day, we just need to make sure it's very fun. And that's what Carpenter is the master of. So this one, Escape from New York, features probably my favorite John Carpenter collaborator, Kurt Russell, maybe my favorite actor of all time, right? Kurt Russell himself said this is his favorite movie that he ever did, Escape from New York. Now, about this movie specifically, Alex, when is the last time you had seen Escape, and what are your initial thoughts on this flick?
It's funny. The last time I watched Escape from New York, I think was about a year ago.
Really?
Again, this is a movie that I honestly, I watched this movie when I was much younger, when you catch it on HBO when your parents aren't paying attention to what you're watching. And then you kind of figure out that, oh, that movie's actually awesome. And oh, that's peak Carpenter stuff, So you keep watching it. And I think I've watched it every couple of years up through college, so on and so forth. But there's never a time where I didn't find this movie awesome. And this time is no different. Actually, it's interesting. This time I paid much more attention to the, I don't know if this is a dad thing. Maybe I'm just old now. I paid so much more attention to the geopolitical thing that was going on the entire time. The president's been downed on the Manhattan prison island. Oh shit, he's got to get to that peace summit. Otherwise they're not going to know shit.
You were worried about the peace summit?
But I was sitting there listening to that again. And again, I've never, especially when I was younger, didn't give a shit about that part at all. All I knew was that Plisken had 24 hours and he had a fucking nanite explosive in his neck and all that stuff. And I was so focused on Plisken. This is the first time I've watched the movie and been I apologize if this sounds rude, but who fucking cares what Donald Pleasance thinks about the state of the world peace when he has the United States police force guarding? That's the thing I started thinking about is
you're under. See, that's the thing. You've grown old and cynical, so now you're maybe there is no value. I was struck by. It's so funny because I've seen this movie so many times. I always forget about the president. It's weird because in my mind, it's essentially that they send Snake Plissken in to fucking beat ass and he just escapes in my mind.
Yeah.
I always forget that it's a reverse Air Force One where it's essentially Snake get off of your own plane and let's go.
The president is essentially inconsequential. There's almost no reason for it at all. And it ends up not meaning anything because, again, I would say Escape from LA has far more devastating ending consequences. This one is oh, well, whatever. I mean, we don't even care. Snake Plissken survived, so who gives a shit about the rest of this?
Well, no, let's be clear, right? We're kind of jumping ahead, right? But the end of the movie boils down
I'm talking about the ending.
Let's make an argument that Donald Pleasance gets fucking wasted by the Duke, right? They still have the tape. I've never understood the tape because essentially he recorded an audiobook of his speech. I was Do the Post-its not exist of the speech?
No.
Can we not just? No one has a tape backup.
That was the thing that always, like, this time particularly, I was like, wait a second. Absolutely none of this makes sense, and the president's literally inconsequential at this point. Because are you telling me that absolutely no other scientist on Earth knows the information? I have never cared about the information that's on that tape. And then this time I was watching it, and it's interesting because we have a kid now, so I watch every movie with subtitles, with closed captioning. So I was actually reading it this time. I was like, wait, what? Like, this is about like nuclear fission and shit like that. I'm like, never matters.
It is the future of mankind, as we learn.
There's got to be 1,000,001 doctors and scientists in the world who know about this, and you're telling me this cassette tape is the only thing that stands between us and oblivion. I'm like,
this is how you know we're getting too old, is that we've all been in meetings and shit, and you're like, surely someone would have sent via messenger the transcript of said tape. Because if you're just watching it on
backup somewhere,
but if you're watching it on your early '80s TV, there's static and like, what do they have? Someone like transcribing it? Is he like, clearly it doesn't make an what I like about it though is this movie is so wildly cynical, but we're constantly kind of cheering for Snake, which is weird. It plays in this Western like lone gunslinger thing, right? And so the nature of making the president just this fucking laughable buffoon that doesn't really matter, and that Snake has to go in and save this man in his little briefcase, right? Otherwise, the whole world will be undone. And at the end, Snake just being like, fuck that guy. It actually makes it better in this movie to me, right? In a lot of other movies, the fact that the stakes of the mission don't matter at all would be a flaw. But in this one, it's kind of getting at that broken American dream, which is what Snake is always going. You know, one of the things that struck me this time, right? It's kind of a twofold, is the introduction and myth building of Snake Plissken early in this movie is so fucking good, because really,
it's awesome.
We don't really get our first kind of Snake Plissken scene until 18 to 20 minutes in. And it's weird because when you go back now, he's become such an enormously iconic character. You have all this built-in stuff. When you forget, when we first see him, he's just this fucking badass dude who gets out. You know, he looks like kind of every guy outside of an army surplus who wants to tell you about Nam, and you're like, no, I'm just here for a Halloween costume bit. Thanks, sir. No. Right? But like, one of the things, right? Like, eye patch to camera. When we first see him, they don't give us that beautiful Kurt Russell side. They give us eye patch side. You know, having the eye patch period, you're like, this is all... He just reeks of cool, right? All the guards are like quaking in their, knees like, oh God, it's Snake, not Snake. And you're just like, they're just making this guy out to be the baddest motherfucker that ever lived.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that is most impressive this time watching the movie is I always forget how good John Carpenter is at building this world. Like, in any other movie, that preamble of what has taken place in America should be boring as hell. And I'm like, I don't give a shit about any of this. Like, they did it in Demolition Man, where they like explained in a crawl.
Right.
I'm like, and again,
we've talked about a movie.
I like text crawls. I do. I enjoy them, but like, it's also kind of like a boring synopsis of something that would be really cool to see. This is the first time where there's no crawl in this. It's just a computer explaining to me what it is, what's gone on in the world. And that is actually really exciting. It's like, oh, wow, they fucking sealed off New York. That's pretty cool.
The Deborah Hill computer.
And again, boop, 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 boop. Beep, 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 beep.
Also, another Halloween connection, right? Deborah Hill's the computer voice you hear. And Nick Castle, who, if I'm not mistaken, is the original Shape, as he's called, who plays Michael Myers, co-wrote this movie. So Michael Myers is a little bit infused with Snake Plissken, perhaps.
Ooh.
There you go.
Nice connection. But I think that's, again, this what makes the movie even more thrilling is the world that's set up is that, and it's fascinating because honestly, like, this year particularly, which has been very rough, I would say that this movie is really relevant because... Like, the president's plane gets taken down into Manhattan Island by, I think, the American Liberation Front. I'm not really sure what the name
American Liberation Front. They represent the workers.
Sorry,
and
I can never remember if
anti-imperialists.
it's. I can never remember if it's that or if that's the group she's the group. No, the group she's a part of. Stop. The group she's a part of from Escape from L.A. But
right.
So the American Liberation Front downs it, and like, yeah, she's like, we're here for the workers against the racist police state, and I'm like, ooh, that's a very close to home today. It's a very fascinating thing because this is supposed to be 1997, which this movie came out in 81, so it's the future. And again, like, they do such a good, like, this is John Carpenter just doing such a good job of being the version of anti-establishment that like a fucking plucky kid from Aurora, Ohio can like understand without like actually like having to do any sort of like research whatsoever.
Well, it is. It's very American, right? Because we
Very
see
much.
that our government is essentially headed by this absolute dipstick, Donald Pleasance, right? He's kind of this buffoon, right? We have this major city that we've just walled off, and they never explain, like, did the people of Manhattan just leave, or did we say, they're the least desirable in this cluster? We'll just fucking, pepper on the horribles? Like, what? We don't know how any of this we know that crime went up 400%. Right? Across the country. And
Shocking
so they said,
statistic.
fuck Manhattan. That's what we learned. Yeah. But, so you don't learn a lot. So but this is, I was wildly impressed with how strong the first act of this movie is. The script writing in this film is so good, right? One from the introduction of Snake, but yeah, just this whole world, right? We see people trying to escape and they get shot down. We have this police state. I love the idea of, you've been convicted to time in Manhattan. Feel free to just be cremated now on facility.
That's what I was just about to say.
Touch.
That's the thing that I noticed this time that I had never like clued into before. I was like, holy shit, they're literally just giving people an out. They're like, hey, if you want to get burnt to a crisp, we'll just cremate your remains now. Like, you don't want to have to deal with that bullshit.
At the Statue of Liberty, which is now the
Statue of Liberty,
the makeshift operations center for the fucking occupational police army.
Perfectly done. Like, it's so good.
But what happens is, what I think is so good about this movie, right, is there are movies that are, character studies, right, or, even mumblecore stuff like Duplass Brother movies where it's like, we're just here to, watch funny actors or a character.
Right.
Some pie in the sky, like, day in the life, whatever. This is one of those movies where the moment someone explains it to you, you're like, oh, fuck, that sounds awesome. Right? This movie, the premise is so fucking good. So, one, you have this amazing dystopian America. But we pair it with this most American parable, which is one man, just based on his badassness, can do whatever. So, what we learn is that Snake was the best of the best, right? And I love, too, because when they introduce him to, Hawk, or whatever his name is, Hawk.
It's a Hawk, Lee Van Cleef, man.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is
it's not
key
Hawk,
casting
though, right?
in this
I think
movie.
it was H-A-U-T or something. Hawk.
I thought it was Hawk.
See, that sounds cool, because I was reading it with captions, and I think it's Hawk. Right? Like, it's Hawk in here, because of Lee Van Cleef.
Looking it up right now.
But anywho, not that I'm an expert of character names. But when they introduce him, right, it's you can't take his cuffs off. Snake's too tough. His face is in shadow, right? The shadowy American badass. And it's almost funny because Snake Plissken's voice is almost what you would do as a badass voice if it was like sketch comedy. But it so perfectly works because they built this myth. And so what you do is you take this perfect American hero in the setting of a destroyed, useless America, and a dipstick, Elmer Fudd looking fucking president bopping around. And but this is what they do well, right? Is you're the only one here. We have no time for a backup plan. The police go in, which I had forgotten about. The police actually go in and they're like, leave or we'll kill him. Right? And they hand him the fucking presidential finger. So what you do is you're setting everything up so fucking brilliantly to where it honestly makes sense. Because again, it's one of those things that every time I rewatch it, I'm like, oh yeah, Snake's not a good guy. Because through the movie, you watch him as a good guy, and you're like, oh yeah, he tried to rob the Federal Reserves, right? He's like this, runaway Jesse James outlaw murdering bastard. But because we need him right now, because he's an American, we need his skills. Let's go, America. Woo! And he's going to dive in. They have no fucking time. And I love that we have little miniature explosives in your neck, right? And you pair that with Snake showing a human weakness of, I don't like needles. And you're like, this movie is just crushing it on every level, right?
Yeah.
That opening
From
act,
the jump.
you cannot, to me, have a stronger, more streamlined opening act for a movie that so heavily relies on this amazing premise. If you buy into this amazing premise, I don't see how you could possibly be disappointed by what comes after.
I mean, I would go one step further and say, how do you not buy in on this amazing premise with everything they set up?
That's true.
Like, they do such a good job to give you this premise on a silver platter and be like, hey, this is the world you're going to live in for the next hour and 40 minutes. What do you think? Like,
well, like a great example of this, right, is something like
kind of just don't like movies.
Well, right, but this is what I'm saying, right? An example of this to illustrate the other thing of our point, right? A movie that I adore, It Follows, right? Essentially, they set up this really amazing premise. If you fuck someone who has already fucked someone who's already, essentially it's like a chain letter, right? For those of you who are old enough to remember chain letters, right? But with P's and V's. So you do that. And if you fuck a person, essentially you have been sexually targeted by this ghost, and it just slowly walks, and it can take any shape. And as they lay that out, you're like, oh my God, this is a fucking flawless premise. There's an amazing scene where the ghost is just slowly walking as like an old person. And you're like, oh my God, I'm so in. The problem is that by the end of the movie, they set up such a great premise and a unique set of rules that by the end of the movie, when they start kind of flubbing their own rules and doing it not in the most, like if this thing's a predator that can shapeshift, it can do better than giant guy with a hole in his face who's peeing his pants. Like that's the problem when the great premise is one thing, but to so deliver on it is another step, right? And I think this movie is the best example of that kind of perfect elevator pitch synopsis of a film that you would be jazzed for, that gives you every fucking thing you want.
I don't disagree. I mean, it does such a good job from the very tip of the top all the way down. Like, again, like there's no tighter first act than I've seen in a movie in a long time.
Yeah.
Like, and again, it gives you a lot of information, and usually you would be bogged down pretty quickly and be like, I don't really need that scene, or I don't really need to know this stuff. You need to know everything because, first off, the stakes are surprisingly low when you think about them.
Yeah, we have to fight to save America that just sprinkles murderers on random Manhattan neighborhoods.
Right. So there is the like when you think about it, if you're given any, like this is the trick of the premise, and this is the thing that I love about the beginning of the movie is like, if they give you any minute to think about actually what the stakes are in this movie, be like, just let him die. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
That's sort of like it's what we talked about. Like, you kind of like you throw your hands up like, well, it's not like it's not like President Doofy's going to be able to do anything. So
President Doofus's 4-part plan that he drew in crayon on an Olive Garden menu to save America from the police state. No, but this is this is the greatest thing.
That's what's brilliant.
The movie has us believe that the militant police force has said, hey, it's okay with us if Snake Plissken moves into your neighborhood where your daughter lives, that guy could be your neighbor so that he can save Doofy in his Fisher Price briefcase with the cassette recording of some speech of science stuff that he can't remember or say.
Again, it's just like, it's perfect plotting because, again, like you spend no time trying to understand what he's actually like. They're like, oh, he's on his way to a peace summit. You're like, oh, well, yeah, I mean, you should like rescue the president, I guess. Like, never is there a question about like if the president's a good person or not. But you're just like, well, we got to save the president.
No,
right?
The president's bad because when shit's going down, he's like, put me in my escape pod. May God have mercy on you. It's like, do you really think that's an option at this point?
Absolutely brilliant. It's like, it's perfect because, again, like it's the basic, it just gets to the basic premise of like, oh, well, yeah, president in penal colony, bad. Snake Plissken has to go in there and save him. Cool. Like you could say it with you could say it with like no prepositions, no anything, and someone will still
Tarzan
understand the point of the movie. And that's the strength of the premise that takes you in through the beginning of the movie, so that when you get to Manhattan Island and you start the adventure, then it becomes like the fucking Warriors.
Yeah.
And then you're like, cool.
The
now
Warriors where they actually battle, though, which is a nice change of pace.
Yeah, thank God.
As soon as the president is like, even in this moment when I know you're all about to die, I'm going to do a politician line. I was like, that is so aggravating. I hated his ass immediately. And I love Donald Pleasance. Yes. It's built into my DNA. And I was just like, ooh, you're just mad at him. There is a moment, though, where this movie says, the movie wants you to believe this really big thing, right? Which is, if Donald Pleasance, right, gets his Talk Boy tape to that podium, right, that there could potentially be world peace. And we, the audience, laugh at the end when Snake Plissken comes to move in next door, knock up your daughter, and probably kill you and steal your money because he stole the tape that could be the key to world peace. Now, this is what's great about the movie, is it's such a cynical look at America that we go, there's no chance the United States government could do anything good in this movie. So I'm glad Snake at least got one more fuck you in. Because the movie cuts to black on Snake Plissken literally pulling the guts out of world peace and having a smoke.
It's just the best.
It's
perfect.
Dude, this is the thing.
It's perfect Snake Plissken.
Snake Plissken. And I think there's more to kind of talk about with him in Escape from LA, which we'll get to. How they just so easily and rapidly achieve this unbelievable reservoir of coolness is amazing in this movie. He just is the baddest ass movie character. Every fucking scene, everything he does is just cool. Like, here's just a small throwaway. When they're just doing his equipment, you're like, yeah, of course he has ninja stars. That's cool. Ninja stars are cool to dummies. And you're like, of course he has ninja stars. But it was like, they never miss a chance to tell you. Here's a great scene, right? One of the things this movie does that cracks me up is that Snake Plissken is never in a hurry. He essentially is just walking everywhere, not rushing, taking his time, unless he's in a car. He's pretty much taking his time wherever the fuck he goes, which in and of itself is such a fucking strong choice that Snake Plissken's like, just in case, right? Because everyone knows who he is. He's famous in the underworld. It's like, just in case any of my fans are watching, I don't want to look like a sissy who's jogging. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to look super bad. Like, here's a hilarious scene that happens. After he finds the underground, like, theater, right? All these people doing, whatever, cats in this New York theater. And Ernest Borgnine just fucking jamming to it, which I was like, hey, that's the life you want to lead. Snake Plissken is walking through a building. He meets a lady, and he's like, well, I have approximately 18 hours left to live. I could probably dick down for like an hour. Like, he is 100% ready to dick down. And then actual crazy people start coming up through the floor and kidnap her. And then he goes, all right, maybe I'll hustle now, for like 1 block. Because Snake Plissken is dying. He has an actual watch that says, hey, you have 18 hours left to live. And he's still saying, I should probably get this. I
mean, again, it's like,
that's cool. That's too cool.
It's this effortless cool, and I think it makes it even more cool in the face of, like, annihilation.
Yeah, right.
Like, personal annihilation is so just, like, again, it's one of those things where you're like, oh, fuck, dude, that is, like, the driving force of everyone. Is like, well, if I'm going to die, I might as well live.
Yeah.
You know, that's, like, this great, that's, like, the Plissken, it's like the Plissken plurality is like, well, if I'm going to die, I might as well live.
Well, because Snake Plissken is aware inherently. He's like, I can't go in to save the president. That'll make me look like a chump. And then they're like, we're going to blow your head off. And he's like, I know how rare and valuable this is, right? Like, and he gestures up and down to himself. He's like, I know what I'm bringing to the table, and it would be a real loss for this, on its last leg, America. if this, one-eyed fucking statue to manliness was not here.
I was gonna say, it was like, I know it'd be a real shame if you missed this.
You know what's
he's
under
pointing
that
to
eye
the
patch for
money
sure? Or condoms that he intentionally doesn't wear. If Snake Plissken pulls that eyelash, it's like there's a magnet condom, and he's like, "Just kidding, I don't need protection," and throws that shit away.
What Snake Plissken does.
What's
Snake
under
Plissken
the eye
does
patch?
is,
Yeah.
like almost like right when he's about to pop coitus, he flips the eye patch up. He goes, "Check that out," and flips it right back down. He's like, I don't even need him.
He's like, I just want to make sure that only I get mine. That's
Snake Plissken's Snake Plissken raw dogs. That's for sure.
Gross.
But
we saw him inside that little glider cockpit. We got a pretty good idea. He's like, I'll just wait till the last second and eject harpoons.
Again, like, even think about this too, like, because I was like, he's not wearing like camo pants. He's literally wearing tights, like lycra tights, and he looks so badass the entire movie.
Yeah, well, he's got his guns out. He essentially has this so cool feathered, like,
his hair is so perfectly tufted.
Amazing. Like, that's not like
amazing.
Badass hair to me. That's not like guy who's gonna whip your ass hair. But that'd be the thing. Imagine Snake Plissken's just fucking pummeling your face with fist, and you're like, "Oh, is that lavender?" Oh, just like getting your like, why is it?
Oh
so
my
silky?
god, what are those essential oils dripping on?
You're
me?
like, maybe I'll get him in a Muay Thai clinch so I can try to like feel the locks. You know what I mean? Like, it's weird. He is an anomaly to me through this whole movie. But I think that's the thing that always makes me laugh is how he's just not hurrying ever.
No.
Right? Like if he's running, like if this is a Tom Cruise movie, there's 20 minutes of sprinting footage. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like Tom Cruise is like imagine Snake Plissken that you could believe is on a mission, but you do not believe is cool at all. Right? Like your uncle who picked up CrossFit in his middle age. And you're like, I guess technically he could do these things, but he's not cool. He definitely wouldn't have stopped to, sling it with that lady in the building. He has tights.
No, I think.
But, like, that's the difference, right?
I think the other thing, too, is they do such a good job of the main characters that, like, are near him the entire movie are so flighty and weird.
Yeah.
Like, it's Harry, it's Brain, Cabby, and then I never remember Adrienne Barbeau's character. Like,
Maggie?
ever. Is it Maggie?
Maggie. Something like that.
Okay,
Maggie,
cool.
Margaret.
Like, so you have these three characters who have been living on the island for a while. And I also think okay, it's interesting you brought this up earlier. I've always assumed Cabby got locked on the island, and he actually didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, right? You're like, what's Cabby's crime? Maybe he was, like, doing underground, like, illegal VHSs of whatever Broadway show is big. And they're like, you're going to jail, Cabby.
Well, Cabby's like, I've been driving this cab for 40 years on Manhattan Island. I'm not gonna drive it till the day I die. I'm like, wait, so he just got locked here without?
Well, no, Cabby's the guy who like grew up in Manhattan. He's like, this is the best borough. Every other borough can suck it. And they're like, hey, did you hear they're building giant 50-foot walls around? He's like, good. Who needs that Brooklyn trash over here? Manhattan for life. Just driving his little cab. Right? He was probably stoked about those walls. Then at the end, he
was probably so excited.
Yeah, I even get the sense he doesn't even really care if he gets off the island. He just wants to hang out with cool people.
Yeah, it's super key to put people like that around Snake Plissken in this movie because it only ups his cool. Like, I think about the scene particularly when Duke and his people show up to the library to talk to Brain. Mm-hmm. And they're like, what are we going to do? And they start like running around. Like Cabby fucking hauls it to his cab.
And it's like, you slime ball, Cabby. I'm like, dude, he's like old.
Yeah, fucking scumbag.
Yeah, what do you think? Cabby's going to be throwing like fucking 12 to 6 elbows? Like, what are you talking about? Get out of there, Cabby.
Snake just walks. He's like, nah, I got it.
Well, what's really funny is they're walking up. They're coming up with
cool.
the cars and the chandelier car. And Snake literally does this and just crosses the arms and stands there while everyone else is like trying to scurry. And then finally he's like, oh, fuck, fine, I'll hide. He's like, like with a dramatic eye roll, he's like, fine, I'll go around this shadowy corner, fuck. But then he's like, within 30 seconds, he's knocking people out and stealing cars, so he's cool again.
Yeah, when he punches that guy through the car window, I was like, God bless this movie.
Awesome.
Like, these guys are getting it.
Let's talk about this, honestly, because a lot of the movie that we've talked about so far, Snake Plissken obviously has become iconic far beyond this movie, right? I would venture to say more people know who Snake Plissken is or what he looks like or that he's badass than have actually even seen this movie, right? We talked about the amazing setup and premise of, get on the island, get the prisoner off. Let's talk a little bit about the actual island. I think the island of Manhattan in this movie actually becomes so much more fun than it should be, right? Like there's some extra character to this, the setting of this world particularly, that I think is more fun than a lot of these, kind of dystopian futures. Like I was reminded of Omega Man when I was watching this. And you're like, it just looks like a bland, like, here's a place where people don't live anymore. And you're like, all right, like, that's fine. This one has so much more going on that I really like.
Yeah. Well, I think, like, Omega Man's an interesting example because Omega Man, for one, functions a little differently because that's, like, the point is to make it look that way.
Yeah.
Like, I Am Legend's the same way because obviously they're the same fucking movie, but, like...
I guess that's true. This is a world where people still live.
This is a world where people still live, but it's fascinating the way they live. Like, I think that's the thing that I always, like, even when I was younger, I was like, I wonder how these people get food. Like, that's always the thing I thought about. Like, do they just, like,
send the crazies, remember? When she's, the girl he's about to throw down with, she's like, it's the end of the week, they're out of food. So it seems like they just airdrop it in at the start, and it's like, fuck you, get it while you can.
Yeah. I mean, like, to me, that is kind of the like character of Manhattan Island is so vital to this movie working because it's like it's like we were talking about, like using Ellis Island as literally like the processing center to bring people to the prison. That is a great inversion of what Ellis Island actually was. I would say it's fascinating that, you see all these great iconic pieces of New York real estate repurposed in a way that maybe Brain's hideout being the New York Public Library is fun.
Well,
that's really cool.
Even seeing the World Trade Center again.
Even seeing the World Trade Center.
Like,
I mean,
when they just mentioned,
honestly,
even at the mention of it, I was like, ooh.
Makes me nauseous, man.
Yeah, man.
Like, it's one of those things. It's a fascinating thing because whenever I see it in movies, I still get a little caught up.
Yeah.
Like, there's movies where it's just in the background I'm not even thinking about. And actually, it's weird. Yeah, I'll bring this up another time. But, like, it is a weird thing to see that in movies still and, like, not get a little, like, whoa.
Yeah, man.
And again, especially this movie where everything is like a bombed out skyscraper.
Yeah, well, I mean, we see a lot of that,
it's
right?
Peculiar.
Like, we see the just burning remains of Air Force One. We see them walking around. I think what is so fun about this world, I think that's, you were kind of getting at, it is an end-of-the-world apocalypse setting, but people have a community here. I think one of the fun things it's showing us is it's a prison without walls, right? It looks like a world or a city where people would just live and go. Like, it's burnt and there's cars everywhere, but there's no prison guards. There's no people, like, hey, do what we want in like a prison, right? This is just where they live, man. They make a life.
Yeah.
And I think that's getting at this kind of more American critique, whereas, we all think we're free, but really, if you have enough money and this and that, there's various levels of freedom in this country. And so
and the other
I think
thing
that makes it a fun... Oh, sorry. I was just saying, I think that makes it more fun, which is our characters that we follow and somewhat have to choose who we root for and who we side with, whether it's Cabby or is Brain a full trickster, Maggie, whoever. These are people that are here for crime. So then you start going all the way back and saying, should they even be here? Are they justly here?
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of it. Again, I mean, that's another part of like the great, like, side political commentary John Carpenter does in this movie, which is like the police state, who actually needs to be on this island. Like, are we just putting people there because we don't want to have to deal with our actual problems and so on and so forth? The thing I was going to get to too is so many movies about New York, particularly, again, this is supposed to take place in 1997, but this movie was made in 1981, which means we're just coming out of the 70s, getting into early 80s, which is when New York was really, really shitty.
Yeah.
Like, it was it's like a primetime cesspool. Like the Warriors is a great example, like the way that the city looks itself. But I would say more importantly, like the thing that makes this movie really unique as a new examination of New York is that we never go into the subway ever. And I know there's a reason for that. They bring it up at the very beginning. But a really important thing is we never go into the subway, which is almost iconic New York.
Yeah.
That's, I think, a really important piece because if we spend
That
so
would be
much
a
time
fast.
in the city.
Is there any movie or show in New York that doesn't have at least one subway moment?
I cannot
Except
think
for
of
this
one,
movie.
to be honest with you.
I mean, he
Except for this
does
movie,
technically go underground when he finds the crazy guy with the bracelet, but you don't see like a
Sure.
subway.
Right. We're never walking through a subway. We're never doing any of that kind of stuff that we're used to doing in movies, even post-apocalyptic movies. We're still in subways. Like even fucking Volcano managed to get into the fucking subways of L.A.
Right.
Which no one even knows exist.
The Warriors
But,
do like the above ground train for sure.
Right. Well, Warriors are on the way to Coney Island, so
Yeah.
that's what they do. But they're still on the train. The train obviously isn't going to run on the Manhattan Island penal colony, but nevertheless, like the subway tunnels are so iconic. Like, I mean, we talk about it all the time. Fucking chud people, alligator people, like all kinds of shit. They talk about that stuff. There's movies about it. The
Those
Relic is a
people
great
who
example
live
of that
down
kind of
there,
shit.
though.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm
When
saying.
they
Like,
walled
we
off
never addressed
Manhattan
that.
Island, the stars of National Enquirer just said, "This is our land," and so like Bat Boy's like the fucking mayor down there in the tunnels.
But I really like that we don't go down there because honestly, the more important and more interesting stuff is going on above ground. Like, rather than like, because if you go down there, I really think story wise, you could get lost in a way to get out via whatever, you know, like there's a way to go down there and then come back up. But for me, really focusing on the towering, like the towering just like decay of New York itself is what's really gripping in this movie and what's really cool to see.
Well,
the visuals are just amazing.
Yeah, and I think honestly going down underground and finding freaks or freak shows, the people who even in this place don't come up and be seen by the others, is kind of what Escape from LA is all about. And you know, it's a very different thing. I think again, I'm with you. This movie's really interesting in how it plays that too, because a lot of what I find really fun is the way they've chosen to rebuild their society, right? Like the Duke, like the titles they give themselves, putting the chandeliers on his car, like that's classy.
Love
you know,
that.
there's
Love
a lot of weird. There's just a gang on Broadway that just wants to punch cars.
Yeah.
You know, Brain being really mad, like he's one of them that, you know, his name was what, Henry?
No,
Howard.
It was like Herman. It was like Howard Hellman.
Yeah, and so he's like, my name is Brain, don't call me that. So he is losing the identity of when he was a free American for this new, like, that's what I think is really fascinating, right? The rebuilding, and even though you're on this island of lost toys, how you're going to reform yourself and, you know, make yourself seem more important, right? The Duke is really a fun way of doing that. You know, I love that scene when he fucking has broken the president. The president's kind of sitting there crucified, you know, just like, when's the playground break? And they're fucking like shooting guns and throwing knives at him. And he's like, tell him what I taught you. And he's like, you know, you're the Duke, you're the king, you're A-OK, you're hey number one. And he's fucking broken the president of the United. And that to me is the cool shit, right? Is I am the king on this little island. And he fucking breaks the president. Again, maybe not the most sophisticated or powerful president we've ever seen in a movie. The kind of president that still would wear a bib when he eats. But this, you know, that's a really cool thing for this movie to add. So you see these guys trying to rebuild their life. The one thing the movie shows us is one of the shittiest people for sure on the island, I'm not sure if he's the worst, is Snake. Snake is probably 100%. One of the shittiest people on the island, but they're like, but we need something of you, so go. And he's standing there in fucking moral judgment of all these other people. And it's like, wait. We know you suck. But, so, I mean, there's a lot of that. I like that, like, redrawing
They do such a good
boundaries.
job in this movie of making Snake Plissken the hero that, like, and allowing us to forget that he's done horrible things. Like, he's basically an outlaw, and he tried to rob the Federal Depository. You're like, well, that takes balls. Also seems a little stupid given that it's, like, a Federal Depository. Probably a lot of people around. But, like, It's one of those things where like
lots of dead for sure.
It's not like Snake Plissken blends in a crowd, really. Like it's not like someone's like, well, let's see, everyone's got an eye patch, so I guess it's really hard to find them. You know,
who's that eye patch with that perfect fucking Cindy Crawford hair? His gun's out. You know what I mean?
Right. Like,
who's wearing cargo shorts back in the 80s? Like this guy, he's got something. Or no, this is the 90s. Did this movie fucking predict the rise of camo cargo shorts?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Was that like one of those when they go back and they're like, The Simpsons predicted this, and this movie told you that by the end of the 90s, guys were going to be wearing camo cargo pants everywhere? And it fucking came true. I lived in the 90s. That was a real thing.
I know. The fact that there weren't Jinkos is just
I remember getting a pair of camouflage cargo shorts for Christmas and just being stoked.
I remember having a pair of camouflage cargo shorts when we worked out on Wipeout. That was like all I would wear.
Yeah, goddamn. That was essentially like living on the island of Manhattan in this movie.
That's true. Wipeout was definitely an escape from New York situation. Except we were all Snake Plissken, so we were all terrible. We all deserved to be. We all deserved to be there.
Yeah, it's a cool. I like seeing the boundary. I like seeing the modern day Coliseum, right, where we're just gonna fight giant mustachioed man, with baseball bat spikes. That scene is just.
How about that awesome reveal where Snake takes off his shirt and you see that fucking tattoo? Oh my god!
Yeah, that's a bad one. That is the 80s equivalent of guys who have their own name tattooed in like a half circle on their back. Like once you do that, if you have your name tattooed in a half circle on you, I just assume you are like, in case you get lost, your parents need to know who you are.
Yeah, that is definitely the 80s. A cobra slithering up your stomach out of your pants is definitely the 80s equivalent of that. God
and
bless
also, it's like we've heard Snake Plissken talk enough. Like you know that's a built-in line. That's a pickup. Like that lady who was either gonna get gone down on by Snake or get dragged down by the monsters from beneath the floor. Like that Snake joke was right there, like a Ricky Tikki Tavi, right? It was like perfect. Like he's just like, oh, I can't wait to drop this D joke, right? Oh, I love that shit, man.
Get ready for the snake. Like, yeah, like one of those. Yeah, I mean, it was there.
It was cool,
I mean,
man.
I'm sure he's got a million of them, you know?
But that's what I mean. It's just a wild, good time. And it's hard to say. Oh, I'll tell you one more thing I noticed on this viewing, right? When we're on our way out. I love the addition of the tick to the Duke. The blinking eye thing. And it gets really much more pronounced as we're driving on the mined bridge, which, by the way, doesn't seem mined enough considering who lives on the island of Manhattan. I feel like...
Yeah, I got to say, as avid comic book readers, we've seen mined bridges, all right? I've watched No Man's Land happen.
Well, I assumed it was like...
amazing.
I assumed it was a Wile E. Coyote, like, they press the stick and blow the bridge up, not if you... Because I was just like, why don't you guys just walk on the side railing? Shimmy all the way. I know Snake, has like the most unrealistic clock of all time. That is something I hate in these two movies. One of my biggest movie sins is when you're like, we've got 1 hour. And you're like, clearly 5 hours of shit just happened. And that makes me so fucking mad. Like when they're like 20 minutes and you're like, we do the whole bridge and the climbing and the ropes and like, you're like, this is, I hate the false clocks to try to add drama. This movie already has drama. We didn't need it. But back to my thing, I really loved that they added the tick to the Duke. And again, when he's chasing on the bridge, he's like fucking blinking like Morse code because it shows you that whenever he's trying to be the Duke, he knows he's full of shit. And in that scene is the one scene where we see him really by himself without all of his, like, gang. Because every other scene with him, he's got muscle everywhere. In this one moment, he knows. He knows that he's not who he says he is.
It's all a put. Well, that was the thing. I mean, I love that that's just all a put on. Again, and I mean, what's great is sort of it's the counterweight to Donald Pleasance's performance as the president, which is he's a fucking put on too. Everything is a put on. So him to like, especially the end where he like stopped wheeling Snake up, like, which by the way, really shitty. Just to like blow away the Duke And then he's like on the, I'm number one, ha 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 ha, like that kind of shit.
Like,
again,
if Snake had died by 5 seconds, because guess what, President, you could have taken that shot still without, like, you didn't need Snake is like a worm on the hook. Like, the Duke is just sitting there. Snake had already beat his ass. It's like Snake, I did like when Snake punched him and the Duke looked like he was just gonna cry. Like, he's like, how did I end up here? Like, I made bad life choices. It was so awesome. I love that about the Duke, man. But that I
definitely.
guess, to wrap this up, right, is it's an insanely well-written movie that is so full of just wonderfully fun details. Amazing actors doing great characters in a really fun world with just, I mean, the whole first act is that actual rocket glider that just propels us into the movie. And, you know, Kurt Russell as Snake Plissken, just fucking absolutely iconic. I think this movie is one of those, to me, like, if I ever met someone that said all the way definitively, I fucking hate Escape from New York, I'd be like, I wish you well on your travels, friend, but this conversation's done. Like, it's just done. I don't know what else you want.
Yeah, I am not sure what else you could need from a movie like this. It's got its action, it's cool, it's everything you would expect from a John Carpenter action movie. Like, it's, I mean, again, like, I don't understand anyone who could say this movie isn't like top 3 Carpenter, which is really saying something. I don't know if
I would put it top 3 Carpenter. First off, because The Thing and They Live are clearly, and Halloween, those are the 3, like, way ahead of everyone else to me. Right? This might be the best of the rest, but
I would actually say I would swap They Live and Escape from New York. I don't know why. I could not tell you.
And it might be better than They Live.
It might just be because I think it might just be they might just be interchangeable to me, but honestly, not that they're the same fucking movie. That's a different movie compared to this
Escape from New York is tighter and grittier. I get that.
Yeah, it might just be that. But again, it's one of those things where I think The Thing and Halloween are the top 2 in my opinion.
Yeah.
I think that these 2 are kind of interchangeable, and you could They Live and Escape from New York are interchangeable. In a way
that could jump.
You can make either argument.
Because that's the thing. Big Trouble in Little China has such a place in my heart. I could leapfrog almost all of them with that. And then same with Mouth of Madness. Like, that's the problem with, it's not a problem. It's a great fucking glorious gift, right? John Carpenter has that filmography where you're just like, it's movie after movie of things I like, but in so many different flavors. It's actually like almost insane. It's like, how did you achieve this? But yeah, that's it, guys, for Escape from New York. I hope you enjoyed your 22 hours and 58 minutes as much as we did. Hit us up, guys. What did we miss? What's your favorite part of this movie? What's your favorite John Carpenter movie? Actually, we did a poll on Twitter, and the fans chose for the movies that we had left, right, in our remaining slot. The fans chose for us to cover The Fog, which beat out Prince of Darkness, Christine, and Ghost of Mars. The Fog won in an absolute landslide, so we will be covering The Fog for sure. Later this week, on Thursday, we'll be releasing our Escape from LA pod, so join us for that. And again, this month is all things Carpenter, so we're going to try to get as many John Carpenter movies that are amazing as we can. Thank you guys, as always, for listening. Please take a second and leave us a rating and review wherever you find the show. Check out our YouTube channel and subscribe. Nerd Alchemist, plural, with an S at the end. Shout us out on your social medias. That always means the world to us. You can find us wherever. Email the show, filmalchemistpod@gmail.com. For the Film Alchemist, I'm Josh Griffey.
I'm Alex Dandino.
Kill me, Snake.